So just switching tack a little bit. I mean, I know from being friends with you for such a long time that you've always been very passionate about promoting reading for pleasure. And I
Yes.
just would like to ask kind of where did that passion come from? And also maybe, you know, the Ginger Group, Books to the Power End that you and others formed 30 odd years ago, which
Yeah, a long time ago.
what time ago now. Maybe you could just speak to that interest in reading for pleasure.
Yes, I can. Yeah, I can. Actually, I think that it's an extremely good question, but I think that all of us are driven to reading through various things. It might be your parents read to you, which I believe to be hugely important at stimulating that interest, you know, whether it was Enid Blyton or whatever it might have been. I think that if you enjoy, and when I say fantasy, I mean disappearing into a different world. That world could be crime, could be thriller, could be romance, whatever it might be. If you just want to escape, there has never been anything better than a book, because the characters that are created in your head are often better than the characters that are chosen to play the part in the film, because the screen in your head is always that much wider and deeper and more colorful. And to disappear into a book has been a pleasure. And it didn't really matter in my case whether it was Shakespeare plays or indeed sort of deep fiction. I've always enjoyed reading, but there is a problem, Chris, which I think a lot of people in our profession suffer from, and that is that half the time we don't read for pleasure. Most of the time we're reading because somebody sent you a manuscript, or you're about to meet somebody, so you need to read their book before you see them. So you tend to be pushed into certain areas. Obviously, that makes it a little more eclectic, but it means that you often only really get to enjoy reading on holiday. And I thought this was going to be true of retirement, Chris, but that hasn't happened either. I do. If I look around me, I'm surrounded by books I know I'm meant to be reading. And I know that I've got a number of authors who've sent me their work to read because stupidly or as a compliment, they like my opinion on what they're doing. I've got one that's just come through, which is a thriller. I've got another one, which is a fantasy, and another one, which is a psychological drama. Now, all three of those, would I necessarily choose to read for pleasure, Chris? Probably not. But I read them because it creates an opportunity for conversation with that author. So I'm quite lucky to have that. Whereas most people, they don't get to meet the authors very often. So they get to know their author through their work. So in terms of reading, it is for pleasure when I can. And whether it's Harlan Coben or whether it's Felix Francis or whether it's Ian Rankin, there are so many people I enjoy reading, but often don't get a chance to read that often. And I'm looking around. I mean, I've got my shelf, Chris.
I can imagine.
It's like someone poking a stick at you all the time. You know, you said you would. But I think that once you do disappear into a book, it is one of the greatest pleasures. Yes. And I find it very difficult to put the bloody things down, Chris, to be honest.
Yeah.